Just moments ago, inside one of the most heavily guarded private chambers of the monarchy, Princess Anne uttered words that stunned even the most seasoned royal insiders. With quiet certainty and unmistakable finality, she confirmed what many had long suspected, but few believed would ever be spoken aloud. Prince Philip's most sacred Scottish estate, a property steeped in legacy, secrecy, and emotional meaning, now belongs entirely to Prince Edward, and the implications are already sending shockwaves through the royal bloodline. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The weight of Anne's words did not fall gently. It landed with the force of inevitability, like something destined, but long delayed. Those present did not react immediately, because there was no room for reaction. This was not a conversation. It was not a proposal. It was a confirmation. The difference mattered. Confirmation meant the decision had already been made, sealed, protected, and carried across years of silence. Anne's voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone fulfilling a promise she never intended to break. She did not hesitate. She did not soften the truth. She delivered it with the emotional restraint that had defined her entire life. But beneath that restraint was something deeper, an unmistakable sense of closure mixed with the burden of finally releasing a truth she had guarded alone. This estate was never an ordinary royal property. It existed beyond ceremony, beyond tradition, beyond even the reach of royal expectation. For Prince Philip, it had been a refuge from the invisible cage of monarchy. It was where he retreated when the weight of supporting a crown that was never meant to be his became too heavy to carry. It was where he regained his identity, not as consort, not as subject, but as himself. And now, with Anne's confirmation, it was clear that Philip had chosen Edward as the one person he believed could protect that identity after he was gone. Those who understood the deeper meaning of royal inheritance immediately recognized the significance of what had just been revealed. This was not about hierarchy. It was not about succession. It was about trust. In a family defined by duty and expectation, trust was the rarest and most valuable currency of all. Edward, often seen as the quiet one, the distant one, the one who never demanded attention, had now emerged as the sole guardian of Philip's most personal world. That reality challenged assumptions that had existed for decades. It forced everyone to confront a difficult question: what had Philip seen in Edward that led him to make this irreversible choice? Anne's presence in that moment carried its own meaning. She had not simply witnessed Philip's decision, she had protected it. She had carried it silently through years of speculation, through years of shifting family dynamics, through years of emotional strain. And now, as she spoke those words, it was clear she was not only honoring Philip's wish, but fulfilling a responsibility that had shaped her own emotional journey. There was no triumph in her voice, only resolve, only loyalty, only the quiet strength of someone who understood that legacy was not measured in titles, but in truth. Because this was never just about Edward receiving something, it was about Philip giving something, giving trust, giving identity, giving continuity. And as the reality of Anne's confirmation settled into the consciousness of the royal family, one truth became impossible to ignore. This decision had not been made suddenly. It had been building for years, formed in silence, shaped by moments no one else had seen, and carried forward by a bond that existed far beyond public understanding. But Anne's confirmation was only the final step in a story that had begun decades earlier, during quiet moments between a father and his youngest son, far from the watchful eyes of the crown. Long before titles, ceremonies, or royal expectations defined their roles, Prince Philip and Prince Edward shared something far rarer than tradition. They shared understanding. While others were shaped by duty, Edward was shaped by proximity to Philip's private world. And in those unguarded moments, hidden from public scrutiny, Philip revealed pieces of himself that he entrusted to no one else. It was there, in silence and solitude, that a decision began forming, one that would remain hidden for decades. For Philip, the Scottish estate was never simply a place to retreat. It was where the performance ended, where expectation lost its grip, where he no longer needed to stand behind the crown, but could instead stand within himself. And while many assumed Philip preferred solitude, in those moments, the truth was more complicated. Edward was often there, not as an observer, not as a royal heir preparing for some predetermined future, but as a son who understood something deeper, something unspoken. Their presence together was never announced, it was never explained, but it became a pattern, a quiet rhythm of shared distance from a world that demanded too much and offered too little in return. Their conversations did not follow the structure of royal obligation. They drifted into spaces others never reached. Philip spoke of pressure, of sacrifice, of the emotional isolation that came with living a life permanently defined by someone else's destiny. These were not admissions Philip made easily. They emerged slowly, carefully, as if each word carried weight he had been holding alone for years. Edward listened. He did not interrupt. He did not challenge. He simply absorbed. And in that listening, Philip found something he rarely experienced within the monarchy: relief. It was not authority Philip sought in those moments. It was understanding, and Edward gave it without expectation. There was something about Edward's quiet nature that reassured Philip. He did not seek attention. He did not chase influence. He did not measure himself against the crown or those closest to it. He existed outside the invisible competition that defined royal life. That absence of ambition became his greatest strength in Philip's eyes, because Philip understood something others did not, that loyalty without ambition was the purest form of trust. Edward never needed to prove himself. He had already done so simply by being present when presence mattered most. Over time, that presence became something Philip depended on, not publicly, not visibly, but emotionally. Edward became the one person Philip could exist beside, without explanation. And as Philip grew older, as the inevitability of time began to press harder against him, those moments together became more frequent, more meaningful. Insiders noticed it, though they could never fully explain it. They saw Edward's quiet consistency, they saw Philip's subtle shift toward him, but they could not see what it meant. They could not see the decision forming beneath the surface, because in those private hours, Philip was not simply sharing memories, he was measuring something. He was watching. He was deciding. The estate, which had always represented his escape, his truth, his identity, was no longer just a place he protected. It was something he would one day need to entrust. And trust, Philip knew better than anyone, could not be given lightly. It had to be earned through silence, through loyalty, through unwavering presence. Edward never asked for it, which was precisely why Philip began to realize he might be the only one worthy of receiving it. And while their bond deepened in ways no one else could fully understand, the world beyond those quiet walls continued to operate under its own rigid expectations, unaware that everything they believed about Philip's final intentions was slowly, quietly, and irreversibly changing. But while their bond strengthened in private, the outside world operated under very different assumptions that would soon collide with Philip's hidden intentions. The Scottish estate was never meant to be ordinary. Nestled beyond public access, shielded by geography and guarded by loyalty, it stood as Philip's final kingdom within a kingdom. Here, he was not consort, not subordinate to the crown but himself. Every stone, every room, every silent corridor carried memories he refused to surrender. And as the years passed, the estate transformed into something more than property. It became a decision waiting to be revealed. To the outside world, Philip's life had always appeared defined by proximity to power, yet paradoxically restrained by it. He stood beside history, but never fully inside it. The crown belonged to another. The legacy belonged to another. Even the future belonged to another. But here, within the quiet authority of his Scottish refuge, Philip reclaimed something he had been forced to sacrifice long ago: control. This was the one place where his choices were absolute, where his identity was not shaped by expectation, but by intention. He oversaw every detail, not out of vanity, but out of emotional necessity. Each decision became an extension of himself, each preservation of its integrity a quiet act of resistance against the erosion of time and duty. It was here that Philip processed the storms that had defined his life. When royal crises erupted and the monarchy trembled under pressure, he returned here not to escape responsibility, but to endure it. The estate became his emotional anchor, the one constant in a life built entirely on uncertainty. In moments when the institution demanded silence, The estate gave him permission to exist without it. It absorbed his frustration. It held his reflection. It became the only place where he could confront his own thoughts without the suffocating presence of public scrutiny. Access to this world was never freely given. It was carefully controlled, deliberately limited. Not because Philip distrusted others, but because he understood that not everyone could understand what the estate truly represented. Those who entered were not simply visitors, they were witnesses. They were chosen, not by rank, but by trust. And among those few, Edward's presence became increasingly significant. His arrival was never announced, never explained, but it was noticed. Staff observed the quiet familiarity between father and son, the unspoken ease that required no performance. They saw the difference. They felt the shift. Though no words confirmed it, something was happening beneath the surface, something irreversible. Philip himself had once spoken words that lingered long after they were heard. He referred to the estate not as property, not as residence, but as belonging. The distinction mattered. Belonging implied permanence. It implied identity. It implied something far more profound than ownership. Because Philip never saw the estate as something he possessed, he saw it as something he protected. And protection carried with it an unspoken question: who would protect it after him? For years, that question remained unanswered publicly. No declaration was made. No expectation was established. The estate existed in a quiet state of suspended destiny, its future hidden behind the same walls that had shielded Ed Philip's truth for decades. But those closest to him sensed something inevitable approaching. They saw the subtle changes, the careful considerations, the emotional gravity that began to surround the estate in Philip's final years. It was no longer simply his refuge, it was becoming his final message. Because Philip understood what few others did, that legacy was not about what you leave behind, but about who you trust to carry it forward. And as time pressed harder against him, as the certainty of absence became unavoidable, he began preparing not for the estate's survival, but for its continuity in the hands of someone who would understand its meaning, its silence, and its soul. And yet, as Philip aged, he began preparing for the inevitable taking steps that would quietly alter the monarchy's emotional landscape forever. It wasn't announced, it wasn't debated, and it certainly wasn't expected. Somewhere within Philip's final years, beyond the reach of speculation and beyond the influence of royal tradition, a decision was sealed. A document was prepared. Witnesses were chosen carefully, and Princess Anne became its guardian. What Philip decided in those final moments wasn't simply about inheritance. It was about truth, trust, and the future he believed only one person could protect. Philip understood something that few others ever fully grasped, that within the monarchy, visibility was power, but invisibility was freedom. And it was within that freedom that he chose to act. He did not consult publicly. He did not invite discussion, because discussion would have invited interference, and interference would have forced his decision into the rigid framework of royal expectation, stripping it of the emotional clarity that guided him. Philip had spent a lifetime honoring tradition. But this decision was never about tradition. It was about something far more personal. Something far more final. The preparation began quietly. There were no grand declarations, no ceremonial acknowledgements. Instead, Philip approached it with the same deliberate control he had applied to every meaningful choice in his life. He oversaw every element himself, every clause, every word, every legal reinforcement necessary to ensure that his intent could never be altered, challenged, or undone. This was not simply preparation, it was protection. He was protecting the estate, yes, but more importantly, he was protecting the meaning behind it, because Philip knew that once he was gone, others would attempt to interpret his silence. And silence, within royal circles, often invited assumption. Philip was determined to leave no room for assumption. Princess Anne's role in this process was not accidental. It was inevitable. She was the only one Philip trusted with absolute certainty. Anne had inherited his discipline, his emotional restraint, and his unwavering loyalty to truth over convenience. She did not seek influence. She did not seek recognition. And because of that, Philip knew she would never betray the weight of what he was entrusting to her. When he made her executor of this decision, He was not merely assigning responsibility. He was passing the burden of his final truth into the hands of someone strong enough to carry it without hesitation. Anne accepted without question. But acceptance did not mean ease. She understood immediately what this responsibility meant. She understood that she would carry knowledge capable of reshaping family dynamics, of challenging unspoken assumptions, of exposing a choice that others might struggle to accept. Yet she never resisted it. She never faltered. She protected it with the same quiet strength Philip had seen in her since childhood. She became its guardian, not just legally, but emotionally, and for years she said not. Hing. That silence was not passive, it was active. It required endurance. It required watching as speculation continued around her. It required standing beside family members who believed the future of Philip's estate remained uncertain, knowing the truth had already been decided. There were moments when revealing it would have been easier, moments when releasing the burden might have offered relief. But Anne never chose relief over loyalty. She understood that Philip's decision was not meant to be revealed until the exact moment it could no longer be questioned. Because Philip had anticipated resistance, he had anticipated the emotional consequences that would inevitably follow, and he prepared Anne not just to reveal the decision, but to withstand its aftermath. He knew that his choice reflected his heart, not the institution, and that difference would matter more than anyone realized. In making that decision, Philip did something both simple and extraordinary. He chose truth over expectation, trust over hierarchy, legacy over perception. And when Anne finally spoke, she was not creating change. She was revealing it, revealing a future that had already been sealed long before anyone understood what was coming. But Philip's decision would not exist in isolation. It would ripple outward, affecting every member of the royal family in ways few were prepared to confront. When Anne finally confirmed the truth, it didn't simply clarify ownership, it reopened wounds long buried beneath royal composure. For some, the revelation was unexpected. For others, it was deeply personal, because Philip's decision forced each member of the family to confront an uncomfortable reality that inheritance wasn't determined by rank, but by trust. And in that moment, Edward stood alone as the one Philip had chosen above all others. The impact was immediate, though not publicly visible. Within the monarchy, reactions were never loud, they were quiet, controlled. But beneath that control lived emotion too powerful to ignore. For decades, an unspoken understanding had existed about how legacy flowed. It followed hierarchy. It followed the invisible structure that held the institution together. Philip's decision disrupted that structure in a single, irreversible moment. It did not break the monarchy, but it challenged its emotional foundation. Because Philip had made it clear that loyalty, not lineage, had guided his final judgment. Those closest to the family felt the shift first. Conversations grew more careful, silences grew longer. The confirmation had introduced a new truth that no one could undo. Edward had not asked for this responsibility, and that reality made it even more powerful. He had not positioned himself. He had not maneuvered. He had simply existed within Philip's trust. And now, that trust had transformed into something permanent, something visible, something impossible to ignore. For Edward himself, the weight of that responsibility was unlike anything he had carried before. This was not ceremonial. This was not symbolic. This was deeply personal. He understood what the estate represented. He understood what it meant to Philip. And he understood what it meant that Philip had chosen him above all others. It was not victory. It was burden. Because with that inheritance came a silent promise. A promise to protect not just the land, but the memory, the meaning, and the truth Philip had entrusted to him. That kind of responsibility did not celebrate itself. It settled into the soul quietly, reshaping everything. Anne remained the anchor through it all. She did not attempt to soften the reality. She did not attempt to justify it. She simply stood by it. Her strength became the emotional bridge between Philip's decision and the family's acceptance of it. She understood that her role was not to explain Philip's reasoning, but to ensure his choice was honored exactly as he intended. She carried Philip's certainty forward with the same unwavering discipline he had carried throughout his life. And in doing so, She prevented doubt from eroding the truth he had left behind. The estate itself now carried a new emotional gravity. It was no longer simply Philip's sanctuary, it had become Edward's responsibility. Its existence now symbolized something far greater than inheritance. It symbolized Philip's final act of judgment, his final act of trust. And that symbolism did not exist in isolation. It echoed through every corner of the royal family, forcing each member to confront their own relationship with Philip, their own understanding of his silence, and their own assumptions about what legacy truly meant. Royal unity was not shattered, but it was tested, because Philip's decision revealed something that had always existed beneath the surface. Love within the monarchy was not expressed through words. It was expressed through choices, through trust, through actions that carried meaning far beyond public recognition. And Philip's final choice had spoken louder than anything he had ever said aloud. Yet amid the emotional turmoil, one question remained unanswered. Why Edward, and why now? Trust is not granted easily within the monarchy. It is earned through silence, loyalty, and restraint. And Philip believed Edward possessed all three. While others carried the weight of expectation, Edward carried the weight of understanding. He never demanded Philip's approval, he earned it quietly. And in Philip's final reckoning, that quiet loyalty became the deciding factor in a choice that would redefine Edward's place forever. From the outside, Edward's life often appeared understated, even overlooked. He did not dominate headlines. He did not shape his identity around the pursuit of recognition. And yet, it was precisely that absence of ambition that Philip noticed most, because Philip understood the hidden danger of expectation. He had lived his entire life inside it. He knew how it shaped people, how it hardened them, how it sometimes pulled them further away from truth rather than closer to it. Edward never allowed expectation to define him. He existed without needing validation, and in that quiet independence, Philip saw something rare: authenticity. Philip was not a man easily impressed by words. He judged character through consistency, through observation, through moments when no one realized they were being seen. Edward never performed loyalty. He lived it. He did not seek to position himself within Philip's favor. He simply remained present. He listened when others spoke. He understood when others struggled. He respected Philip not as a symbol, but as a father navigating a lifetime of emotional isolation. That distinction mattered more than anyone realized, because Philip had spent decades surrounded by people who respected his title. Edward respected his truth. Their shared privacy became the foundation of something deeper than inheritance. It became trust built slowly, reinforced through years of emotional honesty that existed outside the rigid structure of royal life. Philip did not need to explain himself to Edward. He did not need to justify his silence or defend his choices. Edward understood instinctively, and that understanding created something Philip had rarely experienced, a sense of being seen without judgment. In Edward's presence, Philip did not need to carry the armor he wore everywhere else. That emotional safety became increasingly significant as Philip grew older. He began to reflect more, to measure his life not through public achievement, but through private meaning. He understood that legacy was not simply about what endured, it was about who protected it. And Philip began to see Edward not as a son shaped by royal duty, but as the guardian of something far more personal. Edward never sought inheritance, and that was exactly why Philip trusted him with it, because inheritance pursued was different from inheritance entrusted. One was driven by desire, the other was driven by responsibility. Philip knew the estate was more than land. It was memory. It was identity. It was refuge. And he believed Edward would honor those truths without attempting to reshape them. Edward would not turn it into something it was never meant to be. He would preserve its silence. He would protect its meaning. He would carry forward the emotional legacy Philip had embedded within it. That certainty gave Philip peace in a way few other decisions ever could. Because in choosing Edward, Philip was not simply deciding who would inherit his estate, he was deciding who would inherit his truth, who would carry forward the part of him that existed beyond the crown, beyond duty, beyond expectation. Edward became the continuation of something deeply human, something fragile, something irreplaceable. And that choice revealed the depth of Philip's understanding of both himself and the son who had never asked for anything, yet had given everything simply by being present when it mattered most. But the true significance of the estate's transfer extends far beyond land. It represents something much deeper. The estate was never about ownership, it was about continuity. By entrusting it to Edward, Philip ensured that a piece of himself would remain untouched by time, untouched by change. The decision was not an ending, it was a beginning. And in Edward's hands, Philip's private world would continue to exist exactly as he intended, beyond the reach of expectation or interference. For Philip, identity had always been complicated. He lived beside the crown, but never within its shadow completely. He carried responsibility without possession, influence without authority. And over time, that quiet contradiction shaped him into someone who understood the difference between public legacy and personal truth. The estate became the place where those two worlds separated. It was not shaped by royal expectation. It was shaped by Philip's inner life, his choices, his reflections, his silence. By giving it to Edward, he ensured that part of himself would survive unaltered, preserved exactly as he had left it. Edward now stood in a position no one had predicted, yet one Philip had foreseen with absolute clarity. He was no longer simply the youngest son navigating the quiet edges of royal existence. He had become something far more significant, the guardian of Philip's emotional legacy. That role carried meaning beyond titles or recognition. It meant protecting something invisible, but irreplaceable. It meant understanding the difference between possession and preservation. Because Philip had not chosen Edward to own the estate, he had chosen him to protect what it represented. The estate itself became a symbol of Philip's final message. It revealed his priorities in a way no public statement ever could. He had not been guided by hierarchy. He had been guided by connection. He had not chosen based on expectation. He had chosen based on trust. That distinction reshaped the meaning of inheritance itself. It reminded the royal family that legacy was not dictated by protocol. It was defined by truth. And Philip's truth had always existed quietly, waiting for the moment it would finally be understood. For Edward, the responsibility was both an honor and a burden. He understood that the estate was not simply a continuation of Philip's physical presence, but of his emotional existence. Every decision he made moving forward would carry the weight of that understanding. He was not just preserving land, he was preserving memory, preserving identity, preserving the last private refuge of a man who had spent his entire life sacrificing privacy for duty. That realization did not elevate Edward above the family, it placed him deeper within its emotional foundation. Philip's decision also reshaped how Edward would be seen, not only by others, but by himself. He had spent much of his life existing outside the central narrative of royal succession. Now, he stood at the center of something far more personal. He had become the continuation of Philip's inner world. That transformation did not come with ceremony, it came with silence. And within that silence lived the full weight of Philip's trust. This continuity extended beyond Edward alone. It extended into the future of the monarchy itself, because Philip's decision demonstrated that legacy was not static. It evolved. It adapted. It moved forward through those capable of protecting its meaning rather than reshaping it for convenience. Edward became the bridge between Philip's past and the monarchy's future, ensuring that something deeply human would survive within an institution often defined by structure rather than emotion. And yet, even with the estate now entrusted to Edward, one truth remained undeniable: Philip's decision had not simply preserved his past, it had quietly reshaped the emotional landscape of the royal family's future in ways that would continue unfolding long after his absence. And yet, even now, insiders believe Anne knows more than she has revealed. Princess Anne's confirmation closed one chapter, but hinted at another. Her words were precise, controlled, final. But behind them lingered the unmistakable sense that Philip's plan extended further than anyone yet understands. Because Anne was not just messenger, she was witness. And somewhere within her silence may remain truths still waiting for the right moment to emerge. Truths capable of reshaping everything once more. Anne had always existed in a space few others could endure. She was trusted not because she sought influence, but because she never needed it. Philip had known this. He had seen it in her long before anyone else recognized its significance. She was steady where others faltered, unmoved where others hesitated. And when he chose her as the executor of his most personal decision, he was not only choosing someone capable of protecting his wishes, he was choosing someone capable of protecting his meaning. Because Philip understood something others did not. Decisions like his did not simply exist on paper. They lived on in memory, in interpretation, in the hands of those responsible for carrying them forward, without distortion. Anne carried that responsibility with absolute discipline. She never spoke more than necessary. She never revealed more than required. But those closest to her sensed that her understanding of Philip's intentions extended beyond the estate itself. There was a depth in her silence, a quiet awareness that suggested Philip's final plan was more layered than anyone had yet realized. She had been present in moments no one else had witnessed. She had heard words no one else had heard, and those words did not fade simply because the estate had been transferred. They remained with her, shaping her actions, guiding her restraint. The emotional burden she carried was not visible to the world, but it was real, because Anne was not simply protecting Philip's decision, she was protecting his truth. And truth, within the monarchy, had always been fragile. It could be misunderstood. It could be reshaped. It could be challenged by those who viewed legacy through the lens of expectation, rather than emotion. Anne understood this better than anyone. She knew that Philip's choice had been deliberate, precise, and final. But she also knew that its full meaning might not yet be fully understood. There were moments when her silence spoke louder than any confirmation ever could. Moments when her restraint hinted at something still waiting beneath the surface. Because Philip had never been a man of partial decisions. Everything he did carried intention. Everything he left behind carried purpose. And Anne, as the one entrusted with executing his final wishes, remained the living bridge between his past and the monarchy's evolving future. The estate's transfer to Edward was not the end of Philip's influence. It was its continuation, and Anne remained its guardian, not of the estate itself, but of the truth behind it. She understood that legacy was not defined in a single moment. It unfolded gradually, revealing itself piece by piece, through choices, through actions, through those strong enough to carry its weight without altering its meaning. Her role did not end with confirmation. In many ways, it had only just begun. Because Philip's final act had reshaped more than inheritance. It had reshaped understanding. It had revealed that within an institution defined by structure, the most powerful decisions were still guided by something deeply human: trust, loyalty, and emotional truth. And Anne remained the silent protector of that truth, holding within her the final echoes of Philip's certainty, waiting for the moment when the rest of his plan, whatever remained hidden, would inevitably emerge. Because in the end, Philip's final act wasn't just about Edward, it was about ensuring his legacy would survive exactly as he intended. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.